Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, where we take a popular figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I am joined, as always, by my co-host. He is the donkey to my Shrek, or maybe he's the Lord Farquaad to my Shrek. He's a good bit shorter than me. Mr. Jason Gong. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dylan. How are you?
I'm well. We also have a special guest on this week's podcast. Our first two-time guest on the podcast. She's returning from Barbie episode that she did with us recently. She is Vicky Gurova from VidIQ. Vicky, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing good. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. I apologize for almost getting you fired from your job for our first podcast.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping you're not going to be mentioning my job again today. But I guess it's too late.
It's fine. It's totally fine. So, like, you work for a company that does like YouTube growth stuff, and they do a weekly channel audit stream where they review people's YouTube channels. I submitted our podcast YouTube channel for them to look at, which they did, except for one of the guys noticed your name in our podcast episode and thought that he thought that the fix was in. Almost got you in a little trouble there. It all worked out, though. It's no big deal.
It's all right.
Like I alluded to in the intro there, we are talking about Shrek, the green ogre film, this mammoth of an animated movie franchise. Shrek 2 is celebrating its 20th anniversary release. It's getting a re-release in theaters this month, so we thought it'd be a fun time to talk about the Shrek franchise. Now, Vicky, you're the one that recommended us to do Shrek for an episode. So what is it about Shrek that you find so interesting?
I'm actually finding everything about Shrek very interesting, especially the satire on all the, Disney kind of like cliche fairy tale animation. And, it was a big fruit. I mean, I can talk about how great the Shrek franchise was, but I guess, our listeners wouldn't be very interested in, hearing once again that, oh my God, the Shrek is the perfect man, and how like everything is so perfect about this franchise. So I'm really trying my best to think of everything bad about Shrek right now.
But try to put together an overrated argument early in the pod here. So, Jason, Shrek is a film based on a picture book by William Steig that came out in 1990. It stars Mike Myers as the titular Shrek. He's an ogre that lives in a swamp who gets co-opted into saving a princess from a castle. The princess is, her name is Princess Fiona, played by Cameron Diaz. They fall in love, and that's basically the essence of the franchise there. There's the whole like world building that kind of gets crafted around them. There's a lot of public domain fairy tale characters that pop up in this series. There's obviously Shrek's sidekick Donkey, played by Eddie Murphy. And then once we get into the second movie and beyond, there's some other secondary characters that come in. Definitely have to talk about Antonio Banderas as Puss in Boots, who is a standout character who has gotten 2 of his own spin-off movies as well. I know you watched the Puss in Boots movies this week. I went light. I only watched the 4 Shrek movies this week.
We watched a lot of Shrek to prep for this, yeah.
So I'm curious, Jason, like what do you think like makes Shrek stand out in the pantheon of like other animated films? Because like that early part, 21st century, was just like there's so many big animated films that came out in this time, and I feel like Shrek kind of stands head and shoulders above a lot of them. What is it that makes Shrek so, like, especially for millennials? Like, I feel like this is something that like millennials just this is our big animated franchise.
Yeah, this is definitely like a cultural touchstone for us. I don't really know a single person who doesn't love Shrek. I think what makes it stand out, like at least on the surface, is what Vicky mentioned, which is that it subverts these fairy tale tropes. Disney spent the entire 90s in the quote-unquote Disney Renaissance, so they were putting out really great films like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, but those were more straightforward sort of fairy tales. And this movie came along and showed us that kids' movies could be different than that. They could be a little bit irreverent. They could be a lot sillier. They could, just kind of take a whole different turn. And I think kids really latched onto that. I know I did. There's like a little bit of like adult humor snuck into this, but it's still kind of stuff that kids would get and be able to laugh at and feel like they're a grown-up laughing at grown-up jokes. And then Shrek and his supporting cast, they're all just so charismatic. Like, the voice actors are doing an amazing job. The writing's impeccable. They're like really easy to identify with. Dylan, when we were watching this, you said that Shrek is very 32-year-old coded. And you probably said that because you're like 32 years old.
We're not going to talk about that.
I think that like kids watching Shrek are like, he's just like me. Like, anyone of any age can identify with Shrek, and is awesome. So
no, he definitely has like a Squidward energy to him, where you start the first movie and he is a guy that he lives by himself in his swamp, and he's like totally content with his life. He's happy. He doesn't like people like stepping into his space. You know, he's a property owner. He's doing well for himself. And then he's stuck like going off on this adventure. And what I kind of like about the way that like Mike Myers plays it is that he's not a guy that's like learning these social skills as he interacts with more people. Like, he's kind of the same guy that he started like the beginning of the franchise with. By the time you get to the end of it, it's just like he has more people in his life then. Like, it feels like a guy that is like going through adulthood and like starting a family and like making like a, you know, a group of friends, which is really interesting, which is something that makes the fourth movie kind of stand out a little bit in hindsight, because like that's a movie about him like reminiscing about those early days of being an ogre, just living by himself in the swamp and like remembering how much more simple that life was. Mm-hmm. And you're right that, yeah, it's a subversion. I mean, the first one is entirely a subversion because, yeah, he's an ogre, he's a monster. And when you think of a princess being rescued in a tower, it's Prince Charming, who is a character that comes up in the later movies, not him. Yeah, the voice cast is definitely a big standout. It's really interesting when you look back at these actors, especially the main three actors, because Mike Myers does not do a lot of movies anymore. Cameron Diaz took 10 years off of acting, and she's like just starting to get back into acting right now after she's had a couple kids. And then Eddie Murphy has also not been in a ton of movies either recently. So it's almost like this franchise is like the pinnacle for these three characters, which is kind of funny to say out loud.
You were just mentioning before that on how the whole franchise is about like Shrek development, right? Mm-hmm. But you know, I just thought that, do you remember, I think it was like a third movie when Shrek and Fiona were talking about kids, right? We know nothing about Shrek's family. So we don't know.
No, we don't learn about his parents or anything like that, really.
Yeah, but in the third movie, we learned that when he says to Fiona that his father was the one that wanted to, you know, eat him, basically. So it also could be interesting to know that supposedly Shrek didn't really have a good relationship with his father because, you know, he tried to eat him. And so maybe that made Shrek a little bit emotionally unavailable, and how like the whole franchise goes on changing this mindset of not needing anyone in his life because he was so afraid of actually getting vulnerable. And this whole swamp story and being, you know, killing people and trying to be the crazy, angry ogres because Shrek was very vulnerable and hurt and left behind child.
So what you're saying is Shrek is a franchise about getting over childhood trauma.
I guess. I actually wanted to.
We never actually see happen.
Yes, we never see it happen, right? But at the same time, Shrek behaves this way very well. You know, he's very he's not confident about his appearance or however he behaves or looks, and he just decides to be this, you know, extremely just angry and aggressive and I don't need anyone person. But at the same time, he really needs Donkey. I think Donkey and Shrek, they have a better connection than Shrek and Fiona. Because if Donkey was like a female, he would probably be the best, the best kind of match for Shrek. And at the same time, if you look at the dragon, she's pretty much Shrek. She's also this, you know, like very strong, very independent, but at the same time, very soft inside kind of woman. So it's funny how he played out. But okay, before you guys comment on this, I actually wanted to ask you a question that's been in my mind for a while. If you could remember the first time you watched Shrek.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first Shrek movie came out in, 2001? So
Yeah, but do you remember the first time you actually watched the movie?
I'm not sure where I was exactly the first time. It's possible I saw it in theaters. I don't know. Do you know, Jason?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters. My friend Anton and his dad took me. I was in second grade. I remember that the joke that hit me the hardest is when they're in Duloc, which is this kingdom that's like a parody of Disney World, and they press the information button and these puppets come out and start singing, and then they sing, "Please keep off of the grass, shine your shoes, wipe your face." And like, even as like an 8 or 9-year-old, that clicked that they were like gonna curse, but then didn't. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know movies could be this funny. That's my experience with Shrek.
The big thing I remember from the first time I watched it was the probably like the musical sequences. All Star by Smash Mouth is like the breakout from the first movie. Accidentally in Love, the Counting Crows song, got nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars for Shrek 2. This series has like incredible music. Like the Shrek 2 soundtrack is like, it's got some bops on it. Like you can just throw that on like a Spotify playlist and it's pretty good. It's not like a lot of animated films nowadays. You would probably just see like a bunch of like pop stars and stuff like that on your film soundtrack, but this is like alt rock bands and like 90s bands, and it's a real like interesting decision from the filmmakers. Interestingly enough, like these films are directed like mostly by people who like worked in animation departments. There's no like big name directors that worked on this stuff outside of like one guy who is, do I have him up here? I have Mike Mitchell, who did the fourth film. He has like a crazy filmography, Jason. He directed Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo in 1999, the Rob Schneider film. And then
Crazy.
He directed Sky High.
Oh, genius.
And then he's done like a handful of different animated sequels. He's only done one first film in a franchise, which is Trolls. He directed the Trolls movie, but he's also done the third Alvin and the Chipmunks movie. He did the fourth Shrek film. He did the second SpongeBob movie. He did the second Lego movie, and he directed Kung Fu Panda 4, which is currently in theaters. So the fourth Shrek movie is made by this guy who's like a career animated film sequel guy. The rest of them are just done by animators, which is interesting because, Jason, we talked about this like on our rewatches this week. These films are like insanely tight. The script is, they're all like almost 90 minutes on the dot. Like, they do not mess around with the plot of these films. Like, they breeze by. We watched 4 Shrek movies. It takes 6 hours to watch them because they're all 90 minutes long, which is great because, like, yeah, you get into the first act, the second act, the third act. Like, the first movie, you could teach, like, a screenwriting class on the first Shrek movie. You really could. Because, like, the first act is just, like, them getting to Duloc, and it ends with Shrek getting his mission to go rescue Fiona. And then the second act is everything up until them getting Fiona in the tower. And then the third act is just like them on their way back to Duloc, and then the conclusion of the film. It's perfect.
Like you said, these directors come from animation. I think a lot of them hadn't been directors previously. And I think at least for the first 2, the films had multiple directors. And usually when you have multiple directors, it's hard to keep a story tight. It's hard to not just kind of have a lot of different people throwing things into the pot. And in fact, like with the first Shrek movie, that movie was just people kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. They cast like multiple different people before they landed on Mike Myers. There was tons of different ideas on like what the story would be, what Shrek would look like. And it's kind of amazing that it all boiled down to like a perfect 90-minute film.
Yeah, but if you think about it, every single movie on the Shrek franchise, and I read about it, it's like the Shrek franchise is being criticized for it. It's actually has the same plot for all 4 movies. Like, there will be like some sort of we know about new characters. We learn more about the new characters. Like in the first movie, it's about Shrek, Donkey, and Fiona, right? Lord Farquaad. In the second movie, we get Puss in the Boots, Fiona's parents. In the third movie, we get Archie, right? Artie, I think. Artie and the magician. And in the fourth movie, we get like the witches and the oh God, please help me. What's the name of the
Rumpelstiltskin?
Rumpelstiltskin. Yes, but then there will be how a challenge and saving someone. In the first movie, Shrek was saving Fiona. In the second movie, Shrek was again. No. The second movie, did Shrek save Fiona?
Yeah. So the first movie is about getting saving Fiona and then bring her back to Lord Farquaad.
Yeah,
They get married at the end of it.
in the second movie, he's saving Fiona from marrying Prince Charming because she was, deceived and believing that this was Shrek. In the third movie, Shrek saving Fiona because she was basically trapped by, again, Prince Charming and, trying to save the kingdom. And in the fourth movie, Shrek was saving Fiona because she didn't know what she was and she didn't have the life that she had with him. So basically, the plot of all four movies is kind of the same, just jumping around a bit of different kind of circumstances, but the plot is always the same. It's about Shrek saving Fiona, saving the day, bringing peace to the kingdom, to the swamp, to whatever it is. So I guess that's the one thing that we could say bad about Shrek is that, it's not very, throughout like four movies, it's pretty much the same story.
Yeah, I would kind of agree that it's not a super deep like story that's happening generally, and the central like conflict, it's usually about something in Shrek's life. So the first movie is about him like stepping out of his shell. The second movie is about
him accepting experience.
Yeah, him accepting his appearance, coming to terms with like, the in-laws with Fiona's family. And then the third film is about Shrek like being apprehensive about being a father, and then the fourth film is him being a father and having like a seemingly happy life, but as any new parent, he's like insanely stressed out, and he yearns for the simplicity of life by himself in the swamp. So we get like a darkest timeline version of the Shrek universe where Shrek wasn't born and he has to like restore things back to what they originally were. It kind of paints them into a corner a little bit because they've been working on a fifth Shrek film for a while now, and I'm trying to think like what would be the natural progression for this franchise. What would be like the next thing that they could do that Shrek would be worried about? I guess like they could like age his kids up and like focus it more on their kids. I know Jason's a big Avatar guy, so focus it on the kids more than the parents might be the way to go. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I could see that happening. Like if Shrek's three kids kind of had their own plot line and maybe they like each teamed up with Donkey's kids as well. I think that could be cute, but I think ultimately like the A plot of Shrek 5 probably still has to be about Shrek and Fiona and Donkey. And I don't know. I do think what makes sense logically to me, since it's been so many years since the last Shrek movie, is to kind of age up the characters. So like maybe Shrek's kids are like graduating and it's a story about, becoming an empty nester or letting go of your kids so that they can move on with their lives. But yeah, I do think that it would be interesting to see Shrek's kids a little bit older.
Yeah, but it's again going to be, still focused on saving Fiona. So
in a way. Sure.
There has to be something about like saving Fiona, I think.
Yeah, that'll be one thing that would be cool to see for a fifth film is that if we got a film that is actually like our main trio like out together on the adventure, it's something that we like never see after the first movie. They're like always split up from one another.
Shrek from Fiona, and it is kind of frustrating by like the fourth one. In the video games, which I've played, like the second video game's great because it's like a party-based video game, so you always control up to 4 characters. It's the same gameplay as X-Men Legends, and yeah, so you have like Shrek and Fiona doing team-up combos and stuff all the time.
Maybe Shrek and Fiona are gonna face some, like relationship problems, and I don't know, maybe Fiona won't be very happy at the place where she is, just growing kids, and Shrek will be saving her from, falling into her team. I don't know.
I guess that'd be cool if, like, since the fourth movie is about Shrek's midlife crisis, if the fifth one had Fiona going through the midlife crisis, that would be interesting.
Yeah, like Shrek saving the marriage or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other idea that I had was maybe bring back Artie into the picture, even though Shrek the Third is like kind of like head and shoulders the worst of the 4 movies. Maybe they do a plot about like trying to find him a wife because like he needs like a queen far away with him, and it's about like some adventure to like go find like a wife for him. Maybe he could tag along as part of the team.
Or maybe bring back Lord Farquaad, who would be like, "Hey Fiona, why don't you just come to my
Yeah, well, that would be the other idea, is if you go like full Avengers Endgame with it and try to bring back all of the villains from the previous films to fight them like one last time. It's something that Jason and I noticed upon rewatch, is that they basically murder all of the villains in every movie. Farquaad gets eaten by the dragon, and then the fairy godmother gets her beam redirected to her, and she turns into bubbles. And then Prince Charming gets crushed by a fake theater tower. And then Rumpelstiltskin, he does not die. He gets put in a cage, but his goose gets exploded. That poor demonic goose that he has gets killed. So yeah, they could bring back all the villains for like one last hurrah.
Yeah, I would hope they just introduce a new villain. There's no like shortage of fairy tale characters that they could go to turn into like a bad guy. So I'd be interested in seeing something new out of this team.
Now, do they go? Yeah, I was thinking like, what if they go hard, Jason, and they make the villain Mickey Mouse, because Mickey Mouse is in public domain now.
That would be funny. I don't think they would go that far. I think maybe they would put like Steamboat Willie in a cameo somewhere,
or Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, I could
see them
doing that.
Become public domain since the last one.
Yeah, I don't think they'd go as far as to make them a major character one way or the other.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you guys who you think of the villains from all these, fairy tales would be fun to see in a Shrek franchise.
I think they kind of screwed up a little bit with the third movie, where the third movie has like Prince Charming putting together this like team of like famous villains from other stories. So it kind of like takes them away from being possible villains in future installments.
Yeah, but with Shrek, a lot of their villains aren't like fairy tale villains. Like Farquaad is just a king. Prince Charming obviously is like a hero of most stories, and same with the fairy godmother. So usually they're doing that fairy tale subversion. So we could take any like fairy tale hero and make them a villain. You can make Peter Pan a villain. You can make, Geppetto's been shown to be pretty morally bankrupt in the first film. He's selling Pinocchio. There's all sorts of ways you could take classic fairy tale heroes and make them bad.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about the Shrek franchise is that, like, the second movie is like fraught with references. There's tons of cameos and tons of pop culture references, and then the rest of the films like kind of don't really have that. And it what makes it interesting is that like I feel like most people like the second one the best in the series, even though the Rotten Tomato scores don't like pan that out too much. The first one has an 88%, the second one has an 89%, the third one has a 42%, and the fourth one is a 57%. So like those first two Shrek films are considered to be like really, really good, and then there's a bit of like a fall off from there.
What's your favorite Shrek movie? Like, if not, if we don't talk about the first one, what's your favorite movie out of the franchise? The second, the third, or the fourth?
I'm a big fan of the second one. I think the second one also works really well as like a wrap up for the franchise. Like they could have stopped there, and I think it would have been really good. I think it was like a good like natural progression from the first film. And I mean, the first film does exactly what you'd want like the first film in a franchise to be. Like it sets up the characters, it sets up like the relationships with each other. But like the second one is like their first opportunity to like really pull like a cool story out of this. And I think they do an incredible job with it.
Yeah, my ranking goes 2, 1, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, 4, Puss in Boots, Shrek the Third. Yeah, the second one is like perfect. I saw like a video essay years ago that was like, there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but there is a such thing as a perfect sequel, and Shrek 2 is a perfect sequel. And there's only like 2 other perfect sequels according to this guy, and it's like Empire Strikes Back and maybe Godfather Part 2. So this is one of the
you
three
see it a
greatest
lot
sequels.
in animated films. You see a lot of animated films that have like quote unquote like perfect story structure to them, because with animated films like you kind of have to be tight with them and focused, because you can't have like a 3.5 hour long animated film. It would take forever to make.
You can't shoot anything that you aren't going to use, so you have to do your cutting at the script level. Unless
you're like is it Toy Story 2 that has like a blooper reel in the end credits Whereas like they animated a blooper reel.
Yeah, that was funny.
You know, guys, the first time when you and I were having this podcast and we were all like mocking Dylan for not watching Godfather, right? I have to tell you guys, I've never watched Toy Story.
You ever seen Toy Story?
Oh, interesting. No. I mean, that's got to be one of the only other animated film franchises that has like as strong of a hold on the culture, I feel like.
I tried to watch it several times. I don't know. It just never really got me. For some reason, I just never really could endure it. I don't know why is it happening. But yeah, you know what? I actually find, I think in terms of quality and soundtrack, the first two, of course, are the best. But I actually find the fourth one a little bit more refreshing than the first three, because the fourth one is showing us a completely different reality, and it also introduces more of ogres. For me, it was so much fun to see more of ogres, because if you know, we are watching all these three movies, we see the creatures all together. We see many people, we see many witches, we see many blind mice, and then so on and so forth. But Shrek as ogre, he's alone. While in the fourth movie, there's so much more of ogres, and we get to compare Shrek to other ogres and to see what other ogres look like. And I think that it is in comparison that we kind of more can understand more about Shrek. I was very surprised to see that amongst other ogres, Shrek is like has very baby face kind of, you know, characteristics, and he's way softer, and he's kind of like, he's shorter, he's smaller overall than the other ogres are. And he's not that kind of like very tough. So maybe it's also the part why Shrek during the first movies was all alone, but at the same time, he was still portrayed as the most evil kind of like creature by other characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The fourth film is pretty dark too, just like the overall story. Yeah, like he completely screwed up the world, and like his children have ceased to exist, and you know, he's got to like put everything back together, and like if he doesn't make Fiona fall in love with him in 24 hours, like he ceases to exist. He just like goes away forever. It's kind of like a dark storyline to put in the just throw into this franchise. And the fourth one also has like a bit more of a detailed like animation and lighting style to it than the first three. The first three feel a little bit more cartoony in comparison. Interestingly, you talked about Toy Story there. I was trying to see like how successful this franchise was like box office wise, because I was thinking like it must be like pretty successful. Jason, where do you think, it's possible that you researched this already, but in the overall highest grossing animated film franchises of all time, where does Shrek rank with the 6 films?
With all 6?
With all 6, where does it rank all time compared to other animated film franchises?
Oh, that's tough.
I'm pretty sure that The Lion King gotta be on top somewhere.
The Lion King's on the list with the 3 Lion King movies. So you gotta think a little bit of quantity and a little bit of quality. Obviously.
Wait, what are the 3 Lion King movies? Does that include the live action one?
I think that includes the live action one.
And what's the other one? Is it Lion King 2?
Yeah, there's a Lion King 2.
But that wasn't really released in theaters.
I'm not sure if it got a theatrical release, but it says
there's also Lion King 1.5.
The 2019 Lion King movie made $1.6 billion. Jesus Christ.
Sickening.
It's awful.
That's like 3 Shrek movies combined.
So spoiler, Shrek is number 2 on the list.
Oh, that's high.
It's number 2 on the list. Number 3 is Toy Story. So what is number 1? If it's not Toy Story, it's beating it.
How many films are in this franchise?
It's a film franchise with 5 films. The highest grossing film has 1.1 billion.
1.1 billion.
The highest grossing film in this film franchise is a spin-off. It is not part of the main franchise.
Wait, hold on.
And I'll start listing the ones that are 4 through 10. Number 4 is Ice Age. Number 5 is Frozen. Number 6 is Lion King. Number 7 is the Madagascar franchise. Number 8 is the Kung Fu Panda franchise.
Oh, is it Despicable Me?
It is Despicable Me is number 1. The highest grossing film in that franchise is Minions.
Terrible.
$1.15 billion for the fucking Minions movie. This is a we live in a society moment. Despicable Me is the highest grossing animated film franchise.
Toy Story is the 3rd place?
Yes, Toy Story is 3rd. Its 5 films have grossed $3.2 billion. The Shrek films have $4 billion between the 6 of them. and Despicable Me has 4.6 billion between 5 films, which is absolutely crazy. The lowest grossing of the 4 main Shrek films was the first Shrek film. First Shrek movie made $492 million on a $60 million budget. Ooh-wee, that's big time. And then they started bumping up the budgets. The second one, the rest of them have like basically like $150 million for their budgets. And then, but like the second one made 935, the third one made 813, the fourth one made 756, and then the Puss in Boots movies both of them made around $500 million as well. Mm-hmm. So this is a franchise that it just prints money. It's kind of interesting to me that like they decided to pull the plug on this franchise when they did. I mean, the last main series Shrek movie came out 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't really gone back to it yet. I mean, that part of that is due to the fact that DreamWorks got sold to NBC Universal, so there was a bit of like studio, stuff happening behind the scenes. And then also, like we talked about earlier, the 3 main actors haven't really been like working a lot. So, obviously, you're not going to do this franchise without those 3 actors coming back. So, if you want to make like your overrated, underrated arguments, I think like that box office context is really important here. Absolutely wild. $4 billion for these 6 movies. I mean, Jason, we were talking about like, when we were looking into like the Halloween franchise and like horror movie franchises, there's not a horror movie franchise that like sniffs this amount of money.
No, of course not. Yeah, I mean, Shrek is one of those franchises that kind of gets to have its cake and eat it. It gets to like make fun of what Disney does with their fairy tale stories, but also be a fairy tale story and be like a good, competent one.
So the whole idea is that it's a subversion, right? So they take like whatever the tropes are and they just flip them on their head. They're like, oh, Prince Charming is the bad guy. The people that are like supposed to be rescuing the princess, like they're the bad guys. And then this ogre that lives in a swamp, he's actually your hero.
And ultimately, that's going to get you an audience of like people who love Disney movies and like just want to see more fairy tale stuff. And it's going to get you like an audience of people who like despise those movies and want to see that genre get kind of poked fun at a little bit. So it really is able to draw a lot of different audiences. It's
kind of a flip on the way that like the Toy Story films work, where the Toy Story films kind of hit all their quadrants by being like fun kids movies, but for like adults, they're also like heartwarming stories. Whereas like this, they're fun kid stories, but they're also like spoof movies that like older people can find funny.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the second one, which has like references that like kids aren't going to understand. Specifically like the white Bronco chase, which is an O.J. Simpson reference that nobody that is like a teenager nowadays will know like what white Bronco chase is going to be. Or like the pepper spray is like a pepper cracker.
That was so funny.
Or like they confiscate the little baggie of catnip from Puss in Boots.
Mm-hmm. And then the climax of 2 is also great. Just a perfect movie.
Yeah, this franchise, not only does it have box office success, it also has a little bit of awards recognition as well. It's been nominated for, I think, 6 Oscars, if I have this right. The first Shrek film got nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is really cool. And then it won for Best Animated. Shrek 2 lost Best Animated to The Incredibles, which, I don't know, which of those films would you pick for Best Animated Film of 2004, Jason?
For me, it's Shrek 2, like by a mile. But I do know Incredibles is pretty great too, and I know a lot of people love it.
Yeah, I'm sure Brad Bird was going hard to get that win. And then Accidentally in Love got nominated for Best Song as well for Shrek 2. And then both of the Puss in Boots movies have been nominated for Best Animated Feature. Neither of them won though. So 1 Oscar win for the Shrek franchise. Pretty good.
I was always very concerned why they decided to choose Shrek to speak with a Scottish accent. Because I was watching Shrek before with a voiceover, in my mother language. And then at some point I had like good friends from Scotland, and they like started making jokes about like, "Oi donkey," something like this with a Scottish accent, that everyone comes, whenever the people find out that they're Scottish, they ask them to have some lines, tell them some lines from Shrek. And I was like, what? Shrek speaks with Scottish accents? Why? And then I watched Shrek in original, and yeah, And I was asking like them, why do you think they decided to have Shrek speaking with the Scottish accent? And they're like, oh, it's because he's in the swamp and he's like all that, big dirty ogre who is there to fight everyone else, because like Scottish people, they come from Picts, which was there was their kind of like a fight strategy to put themselves covered in dirt and then go beat the hell out of the Romans. And then so but it's still like, I was reading why Mike Myers chose to have Shrek with the Scottish accent, and he says that it's because he wanted to have them this earthy, kind of like nice, pleasant, kind of charismatic appearance. But it seems like such a random choice. Do you think it was actually strategized or something, or was it just Mike Myers like, oh, I'm just gonna Shrek speaking with the Scottish accent?
Yeah, it's tough to say because Mike Myers, for anybody that doesn't know, is not Scottish. He's Canadian, and he also is known for the Austin Powers movies, where he's doing a British accent and he's not British. So obviously he's a SNL alum, so he's a guy who's good with voices and good with accents, and it's a great voice that he has, the Scottish accent. It is funny, like you were saying, Vicky, where they introduce all the other ogres in the fourth movie, and all of them are wearing like kilts and other Scottish garb. So the fourth one is like it's like a Braveheart movie all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They're not going to take our lives, but they never take our freedom.
I've never seen Braveheart. That's my Toy Story or The Godfather. But I know that Mike Myers, it was his idea to do the Scottish accent. He did the entire movie in his normal voice first, and then he went to the directors and Steven Spielberg, one of the executive producers on this. I was like, hey, can I just do this in a Scottish accent instead? And according to Steven Spielberg, it cost them $4 million to re-record everything and reanimate certain scenes to do it. But I think everyone agreed that it was better at a comedic and emotional level, but I could not tell you the logic behind why it's better, especially on an emotional level. But it works.
I'm trying to think, are there any other movies that Mike Myers has done animated with his regular voice, as a basis of comparison? I guess there's the Cat in the Hat movie, which is not animated, but obviously he's in costume.
Genius film.
We're doing that for an episode, aren't we? The Cat in the Hat.
I've had so many people tell me we should do that and that they want to be on the episode. So yeah,
people just want to torture us. That's what I'm suspecting.
It's a good movie. That'll be a fun one. I don't see any other animated films, which is weird because he did such a good job in this one.
Poor Mike Myers. He did a movie called The Love Guru back in 2009, and it kind of put him in actor jail. For anybody that's familiar with director jail, ruined his his want to make more movies. Went in seclusion until he popped up in Inglourious Bastards, and he's doing some work now. But yeah, you think this guy was a giant movie star back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he just disappeared. It'd be interesting to see all of these actors come back together for if and when they do Shrek 5. I'm sure they'll do it eventually here. That's fine.
But there's been so much of these conversations and memes recently about Shrek being the perfect guy,
Yeah.
What do you think if you oh my god, why I have these weird animation? But anyways, if you had a sister, let's say, right, or your best friend, girlfriend, or someone who is I don't know, any a gay friend, someone who's interesting in guys, right? Mm-hmm. And we're dating someone like Shrek, would you be 100% happy with him, or would you still find something disturbing about Shrek? Because right now everyone is just so into putting Shrek as an idol for the perfect guy. What would you say?
I'm not familiar with these memes. I'm sure Jason, is this a thing on TikTok or something right now, or
it's just people who are oh, Shrek owns his own property. He's a nice guy.
Is Shrek a Sigma? Is that what they're saying?
No, he's supportive, he's kind, he has his own property, he's taking responsibility for his actions.
I don't know. I think the movies do a pretty good job at highlighting his flaws as a person. I mean, he's very clearly pretty insecure about being an ogre and being this individual that people have hated and chased with torches and pitchforks for most of his life. And he spends most of the series like trying to get over that insecurity, and it makes him very like temperamental and like he's pretty like quick tempered. I mean, there's like numerous occasions where he just like yells at Fiona, and she basically tells him like, hey, you need to like back off here. It's like the whole crux of the fourth movie is that he just has like a complete fucking meltdown at his children's first birthday party. He like smashes their birthday cake and decides to go, sign his life away so he can go back to the way things used to be. So, and I mean, he's not perfect by any means, but I think he's a good like example of like, a person with flaws and is otherwise like, kind-hearted and good-natured.
Do you think anything would change if he was a human, like he stayed human after the second movie?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting plot point in the second movie is where, they take that potion to turn him into like he turns into Henry Cavill for 30 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got all those human women like all over him when he wakes up. And then Donkey turns into a stallion, and, him and Fiona decide to be like in love together as ogres instead of as humans. It's never talked about, by the way, in the franchise that she becomes an ogre specifically when she transforms. That's really lucky that she didn't turn into like some other sort of monster. She is specifically an ogre. So I that compatibility just worked out really, really well for our guy Shrek.
Yeah, in the original picture book, she's just a really ugly human woman who kind of looks like a goose. Yeah, I mean, if he had chosen to stay human, then he would have just been insecure about like being human, and then like he would probably have been like, oh, I should have stayed an ogre, and it would have been a whole thing with that too. I agree with Dylan. I think if I was at like a friend's children's birthday party and my friend's husband smashed a birthday cake, I would be like, leave him.
You'd be like, this guy has anger issues.
Yeah,
like, what is happening?
Divorce. So yeah, Shrek, like he's a good guy, but he's someone who can't grow as a person without going on a fairy tale quest. And that's really time consuming.
It's a little unrealistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about to you guys, like the first person who was considered to do Shrek whistle was Chris Farley.
Mm-hmm. R.I.P.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing they recast because he died.
Yeah, he did like 80 or to 90% of the whole voiceover. But do you think it would have been like completely different movie? Maybe you would even miss it. Maybe like the whole key point was the Mike Myers thing here.
Yeah, I think Mike Myers' personality is a big part of it. I mean, Chris Farley, I can't think of anything else he did like animated, but I mean, he was a guy that his funniest bits on SNL were like just being really loud and obnoxious.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a part of the Shrek character. But I think, there's like a level of humanity that Mike Myers brings to the voice. And I think he does, just as good a job in the quiet moments as much as the loud moments. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that the recasting happened because Chris Farley passed away. But I mean, this is like any like super successful movie or franchise. There's like a bunch of things that kind of have to like quote unquote swing in the right direction for the movie to eventually be successful. And it's just one of the pieces in the puzzle.
Yeah, I know they rewrote like a good chunk of the movie once Mike Myers was signed. So it would have been a completely different film. There's still test footage from like Chris Farley doing it and some of the earlier animation. And it looks and feels completely different.
It would be very interesting to see it. I actually never saw it. I don't know if you can add it to your podcast, but I think to copyright issues, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. The last question, I know that you guys are in time, but I'm really curious, like, what's your favorite character out of the all four franchise?
I really like Gingy, the gingerbread man. I think he's so funny. The scene where he's getting interrogated and he's like, eat me, poof, and he spits on Lord Farquaad's face. I think it's like one of the greatest character introductions. That whole sequence is like one of the most quotable parts of any Shrek movie. He's like, not the gumdrop buttons. It's so funny. And then in the second movie, when he like goes to the baker on Drury Lane to build the kaiju version of himself, like it's epic. He's always there for his friends. Even though he's a gingerbread man, he's one of the most competent characters and like badass characters in the whole thing. I just love that guy.
Do you know the Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man!
And there's also the Mongo in the second one, the giant gingerbread man that he rides into battle.
It's so good.
Then he makes a Godzilla noise.
Oh,
Button.
it was so hilarious. I loved it so much.
I think that the glue that holds this whole series together is Donkey as the sidekick character. There's so many secondary characters in movies that are like this, where it's very clearly a comedian who's just riffing or just ad-libbing stuff and just seeing like what sticks. And in most cases, it's really bad. However, in this case, like I think like Eddie Murphy just like annoying the shit out of Shrek. He's so good at keeping him grounded, and he's so funny. You know, low key hilarious that he just rizzes up a dragon in the first movie, and the dragon's like just
How
his
did
wife.
they make kids?
Yeah,
It's not explained. It's not explained how they had children. They had these like mutant hybrid dragon donkeys, and it comes back around to be even funnier in the fourth movie when he has to make the dragon fall in love with him again, and he can't do it, and the dragon just tries to eat him.
It was very sad.
Who's your favorite, Vicky?
You know, I would actually say the dragon probably was like my first thought was a dragon, because like she's I feel so sad for her. It's like she's never having the happy ending. Like firstly, she's been kind of like left out by Donkey, and you know she had to kind of like conquer his heart. In the second movie, she was left with the kids while he was far away and he was never there for her.
Yeah.
In the third movie, he travels somewhere far and she's again left with kids. In the fourth movie, she's just, forced in this chamber, never released, and some ugly donkeys trying to make a move. Like, never happy. Kind of.
I'm surprised you didn't say Puss in Boots, Jason.
I do love Puss in Boots, but
yeah, Puss is great. He like when it comes to like characters that are introduced in the second movie, like he's awesome, and I love every single time like he gets like overpowered and they just use like a cat sound effect.
Yeah, it's so funny.
It's never not funny.
Yeah, I do think he's like, it's kind of unexplained why he's still hanging around in the third and fourth movies, and he doesn't really do much. Like now, Shrek just permanently has two sidekicks. But yeah, he's great in the second movie, and then in his own movies, he really shines as like a protagonist.
Yeah, it's great that they got like a serious actor like Antonio Banderas to like be in that.
I also really admire the ugly stepsister, the one that's like,
oh yeah, Doris.
Doris, I think she's amazing. She has this, character development of how she just.
Well, yeah, that's a subplot of the third movie, is having all of the princesses like learning how to save themselves instead of waiting for Prince Charming to rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially I forgot the name of the princess, and like the one that sleeps a lot, and she's like, I'm just waiting to be rescued.
Yeah,
is that just Sleeping Beauty? I think she has like
yeah.
She has narcolepsy.
Yeah, and I absolutely. I also have to point out, one of my favorite parts of the third movie is how when the Snow White starts to sing, and it's first it starts as the fairy tale kind of like song, and then she does this all into Led Zeppelin.
Immigrant Song. Yeah, I'm sure there's a Spotify playlist of like just all of the Shrek movies, like on
definitely.
shuffle. I'll have to check that into a workout playlist sometime.
Song like is that alright? Like 9 Crimes it's called, or what? It's the wrong kind of place. It's the wrong town. It's pulling me through. It was when the frog father died. Okay.
Where he says somebody better be dying. Then it's a hard cut to him dying.
Yeah, and then they start playing "Live and Let Die" from the James Bond.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so let's get our objective rating down before we get overrated, underrated here. Jason, is it gonna be a high one? Are we going 9? We're going 9.5.
Yeah, like it's got to be like a 9. I think people generally agree that there's a real fall off with the second two movies. So that's like one of the only things stopping it from being like a 10 out of 10. But
yeah, if we're doing this number as like the franchise as a whole, yeah, I think definitely like even like maybe like an 8.5.
Yeah.
For me, it's probably going to be 9.7. Still very high.
All right, so we'll do a 9. We'll land on 9 as our overall rating. So, Jason, we'll put you on the spot here first. You have the overrated argument. Why is the Shrek franchise, which we've been talking an hour about how great it is, why is this franchise overrated? Are you going ChatGPT for this one?
No, not really. I mean, I might ask it a little bit, but this is really hard because Shrek is awesome. Watching this series was like one of the easiest things we've had to do for this.
It's a fucking breeze to watch these movies.
Yeah.
It feels like you're like time traveling to like 90 minutes in the future watching these movies. They go by so fast.
So yeah, the main thing is that although the first two films are great, there is a pretty significant fall off with the second two movies, and it does put like a little bit of a damper on what could have been like one of the strongest film franchises ever. The third movie I just think is not funny. I don't think I really laughed very hard. And then I think that Artie is a real like misstep of character and like plot direction for the franchise. It really felt like a script that was rushed. Like they forgot they had to write a screenplay, so they turned it in like the day before they started animating. None of it really made sense as a logical next step for Shrek. And then the fourth film couldn't really continue like that direction, and they didn't really seem to know like any new direction to take the franchise. So they just kind of did this soft reset, so that they could tell the first movie story all over again, which I think is not a great way to progress the characters. I think Shrek got to grow a lot, but you also spend that entire movie not with like the donkey that we've gotten to know and love. Not progressing the Fiona that we've been growing with. All the character development for them happens to these alternate versions of themselves, and it's the same character development that we've seen before. And then those alternate versions of themselves get, erased and poofed away. So a lot of the fourth movie just like it doesn't spend time making the Shrek franchise better in any way. We've also been talking a lot about how Shrek is so great because it's the subversion of fairy tales. While we're so used to like this Disney crap that's all the same. But in reality, while it does subvert like some ideas of fairy tales, it's still about a hero that saves a princess and gets to marry her because of it. It's still a very classic, hero's journey. It's not breaking the mold as much as people like to say it does. Some of the comedy, like the pop culture stuff and the anachronistic humor, it's almost like a crutch. Instead of like making jokes, they just make references, especially in that second film. And it's good for memes, but it's not really good for like you don't have to write really good jokes if you're just going to be memeing the whole time. And ultimately, Mr. Shrek kind of overshadows like other great animated projects from that time. And this is like the one that people remember. The internet has kind of blown it up to this thing that's bigger than it actually is. For those reasons, Shrek is overrated.
Vicky, do you have anything to add for the overrated here? I know you were talking about trying to find some negatives for the franchise.
I was actually more thinking about how Jason mentioned the Artie character, right? So if you look at all of the characters, they're kind of very sarcastic. They're kind of like making fun of the usual tropes of the fairy tales and, they distorting them. But if you look at the Artie, they really failed with him. So, because he's just, all of the other characters, they're kind of like twisted, but Artie's plain. Artie's a good guy who is just a good guy who is just a good guy. There's nothing special about Artie. He's not going through any considerate characterical arc, anything. He's just finding courage, and it's all done like when I was watching the third movie, I was actually feeling very like annoyed with him, because like he's just so boring, and he's one of the main characters in the third movie. So for the third movie, I would definitely say overrated too. That's just
he's so superfluous. He like really doesn't add anything to the story, and it just kind of sucks. Like, you already have this conflict with Prince Charming coming in with his army of supervillains. You don't need to send Shrek to get this kid too. It really just doesn't work. Also, on the topic of Artie, he was voiced by Justin Timberlake, and this is another reason I forgot to write down. But like Shrek, it has an amazing voice cast, but it's really like the first animated, like one of the first ones to really just bank on getting like these big celebrities to do the voices. And I think that set the tone for the rest of DreamWorks' productions. And that was great back then, but it's taken away a lot of like work from trained voice actors. Like, if you look at those 90s Disney films, a lot of major characters were voiced by people who we haven't really heard of, but they're big voice actors. And now we get like Mario movies where Mario is Chris Pratt. And I think that's not great. And you can lay a lot of the blame here on the Shrek franchise. So.
Yeah, probably. And I think all the voice casts they do the singing voices for these characters too, right? That was another thing in like old Disney films is you'd have one actor for the speaking voice and another actor for the singing voice. Yeah, I would generally agree that if you're gonna make an overrated argument for the franchise as a whole, you got to start with the third and fourth movie.
But
it'd be like they're dragging it down.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but it just got to my mind when you mentioned about the voice actors. Like if you look at the cast for The Lion King, it's also very big superstars. So I don't think it was Shrek who started, with replacing professional voice actors with the actual actors. Because with the Lion King, there was Jeremy Irons, huge actor. You had so many other stars, and they were voicing the Lion King.
Yeah, I think Pixar was probably like the first one that like really started doing that. I mean, Toy Story obviously has like a bunch of big name actors from like the 90s that they pulled in for that, and that became their thing throughout the Pixar franchises is getting like known actors. Main argument that I would have for this film franchise being underrated is that I think this is like arguably the greatest animated film franchise of all time, and I think it doesn't really get put in that pantheon as much as like the really upper echelon Disney movies and the upper echelon Pixar movies. I think the fact that this is DreamWorks brings it down a peg for a lot of people, even though it stands toe to toe with them. As we talked about before, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has high scores, it has high audience scores. The cinema score is like A for like all of them, so audiences love it. The box office numbers speak for themselves. They're only beaten out by fucking Despicable Me. So in box office, it beats all of the Disney films, all of the Pixar films. This franchise is an absolute juggernaut, and I think people think of it as like a fun little like silly animated franchise, when in reality I would say it's like this and Toy Story, and like that's like your only argument. If you're saying this isn't the greatest animated film franchise of all time, then you're saying Toy Story is, which Toy Story is great, don't get me wrong, but like I don't know, like Toy Story is like pretty serious, especially in the later films. Like they're really like going for like traumatic animation and a lot of it, whereas like these movies are like they're silly and like they're very aware that they're essentially spoof movies on like classic fairy tales and the world building of that. And I think that there's something to be said for like they just make really, really high quality, tight movies, and that's hard to do like repeatedly. Like we've talked about like the third and fourth movies being not as good. I mean, the third movie is like fine. It's like a perfectly fine movie. What makes the third movie look bad is that like the rest of the films in the franchise are really good, specifically the first two. The first two are incredible. So when you get to that third movie, you're like, oh shit, the third one's not incredible. It's only okay. So it comes off as like the worst movie ever. But like, yeah, you look at it from like, you take a few steps back, and it's something I really noticed on a rewatch here. I hadn't watched these movies in a good number of years before this. Holy cow, these are great.
I just like how Shrek now became more of a culture, But at the same time, I was just talking about, Shrek being like the perfect guy. I have a friend who just constantly sends me all kind of Shrek related memes. Like there's apparently there are pillows right now with a full body Fiona,
full body
Shrek that she can sleep with, like a pregnancy pillows kind of things. And
they're not pregnancy pillows.
They're huge. Just pillows, but yeah, he kind of sends me all that all the time. I'm like, I should get one, and I'm like, okay, go for it. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Shrek is getting. I really enjoy to see how like it was so popular in the beginning of 2000s, right? And then I don't remember when was the last Shrek movie released.
Like the first four were released every 3 years. So the last one came out in 2010.
2010. All right. But I really appreciate the fact that right now we are again, Shrek is again very much hyped for the different reasons, a little bit sick reasons, a little bit weird ones. But at the same time, we still kind of, rewatch these movies. And as you were mentioning before, like for me, it's just the easiest movie to watch. Like all four of it is just so easy. But as for the best animated movie, I think Balto was the best one. But
What do you think is the best animated franchise of all time, Jason?
Shrek.
You think Shrek is
Yeah.
number one?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, Toy Story has the 3 great movies as well, but it also has a fall off with number 4.
Yeah, Toy Story 4 is not good.
Yeah, I'll rewatch Shrek any day. There's not that many other animated franchises that I'll say that about.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's a good one. And definitely, like, anybody that's listening that like hasn't watched the Shrek movie since like you were a kid, they're great. They hold up really well.
And the jokes are still very much, relative to these days.
Yeah, they hold up perfectly well.
Mm-hmm. Even visually, that first one looks like it could have come out yesterday. It's so good.
Yeah. It's animation that doesn't look dated at all. But yeah, anyway, that's going to do it for this podcast, everyone. Vicky, thanks again for hopping on the pod, talking some Shrek with us. Anytime you want to come back, just let us know a movie franchise, and we'll binge it all in a week for you.
I'll just wait till you watch The Godfather.
We'll bring you back on for our Godfather episode when...
Yeah, but I didn't watch the whole franchise myself.
Francis Ford Coppola has a movie called Megalopolis that does not currently have a release date, but it's starting to get screened. When he releases that, probably at the end of the year, we'll bring you back on for our Godfather episode. Jason, thanks again as always. Vicky, do you have anything you want to plug for the podcast or anything you're working on?
I'm working on? No, I'm just admiring Shrek and waiting for...
We'll send you a Shrek body pillow.
Yeah, I would really appreciate it. Anyone who wants a Shrek body pillow should just give 1 million likes to Dylan, and he will send you the one.
Yes, thank you.
Beautiful. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Make sure you like the podcast, 5 stars on Apple Pods, all that good stuff. Make sure to check out our Patreon page. Patreons get their name in the credits of every episode, and they also get episodes 24 hours earlier than everyone else. For myself, for Jason, Vicky, that's going to do it for this episode, the Over Under Movies Podcast. Save the movies. Later, everybody.
Bye.